Hi guys, Brand here with a much-awaited video that I'm sure you've been wanting to have come out for quite some time, because I am a commentary channel, and ever since good old Gabriel Soma release, there's been a perk that's been a lot of your minds lately, that being made for this. The perk where if you're injured, you go 3% faster and you get endurance after healing people. Yeah, it's a very, very much-less perk. It is kind of drawn the lines in the sand between a lot of people in the Dead by Daylight community. Either you absolutely love this perk or you absolutely hate this perk. But either way, people generally feel extremely strongly about this perk and really get really pretty upset about it. There's been more arguments I have seen in the DBD community over this perk than any perk I have seen released in recent memory. And it's, I mean, there's stuff there to, worry about. There's also stuff there that's being over exaggerated. So let's go ahead and talk about how I feel about it, because I feel like I have kind of like a semi, unique take to it that isn't just like black or white. So let's go ahead and talk about it. So typically where it comes down to is this argument really comes down to two sides. One side of the coin is obviously killer mains will obviously believe that this it's just free speed, and it is just completely unfettered and unbound, and it literally wins games for survivors. It will turn a win for a loss to a win for the survivors, especially if all 3 or 4 survivor members of the team are bringing it. Especially if you're playing 110 killers like Trickster or Deathslinger or something like that. That made for this, it becomes extraordinarily powerful. I've also seen Knight players particularly seem to hate made for this, which that I kind of actually completely understand, because obviously your knights are besides the assassin aren't particularly fast, even with your little haste buff that you get by putting them down for long periods of time. And obviously if that person's injured and they're running at 3% faster, that 3% can be the difference between outrunning a guard and actually being hit by a guard. So it's kind of funny, just the thing that I don't see a lot of people actually talk about is that knight players particularly hate this perk, and there's actually a lot of credence to that. I think it's just an interesting little interaction that I just find intriguing. Anyways. Yeah, and it is something that when I do play killer, I do notice that somebody is taking an extra loop around a pallet or an extra loop around a window or a tile. I'm like, oh, they wouldn't do that if they probably weren't a little bit faster there. It's something that I definitely do notice. I've actually seen a lot of people too actually do get a lot of value out of the endurance aspect of the perk, which is something I don't see very often. But there was this one particular match I was playing and this Adam had made for this, and what he would do is he would just kind of go for a really greedy save. Like I would even be out of tear radius and he would unhook the survivor right next to me. And by the time I would walk back, he had healing perks. He had we'll make it and stuff. So we would heal the survivor super quickly that he greedily unhooked. And if I went for him, he'd have endurance because he had just successfully healed somebody else. So it's actually kind of really smart, but it is something that I feel like is a very, very interesting interaction that I actually don't see a lot of killers highlighted, which is I find particularly strong and a very, very good aspect of the perk. That I think could be potentially frustrating, especially for those more greedy saves. So, yeah. And the flip side and the other side of this is survivors are just kind of generally kind of just happy to have a good perk again, because a lot of survivor perks that have come out over the course of the past year have not particularly been very good. Not particularly game-changing. There's been nothing really, a lot of people thought potential energy was going to break the game. A lot of people thought that so many different perks were going to break the game, and those never really ended up coming to fruition as perks that would actually be strong or worth using. Yeah, they do show up in some niche builds here and there, but that's kind of what the perk makeup of what a lot of survivor perks have come out over the course of the past year have been. It's just kind of niche build perks, and nothing really generally good that you can just kind of throw on any build and it will get you some sort of value. I think another thing that survivors typically like about this perk, and it's kind of an alternative to an exhaustion perk, because exhaustion perks are kind of, while they're extremely good and some of the best perks in the game, they are relatively limited, because Lithe, you have to hit a window and you have to have an activation to it. Sprint Burst, which does just kind of go off willy-nilly, you do have to get to get the most value out of it. You do have to 99 it and do a lot of other stuff which survivors may not be willing to do. Balance, obviously you have to fall off of something, but the case in point being that a lot of exhaustion perks require very specific activation or very specific management to continue to use properly. So the idea with made for this is that instead of trading an activation point for an extremely strong top 5 ability in the game sort of ability, you're trading that activation for something that's not as strong but is still pretty good. So kind of a compromise between these. You're taking away the activation. You're taking away the activation prerequisite that a lot of like these strongest exhaustion perks have, but your effect is not as potent while it's still good. So it's kind of like a, kind of a play style difference that a lot of survivors, because you can't stack them, because you cannot use made for this while you're exhausted. So you can't stack like Lithe with made for this, because if you're exhausted, you don't get that extra percentile of speed. So you really do have to choose between the two. You can't do like sprint bursts made for this and stuff like that. Now that would actually be crazy broken. That would be disgusting, and that would be literally the worst thing to ever happen in this game. I would not be cool with that. But it's something that like people are generally happy to see, is something they can, like I said earlier, just kind of like slap on their build and not have to, pair it with another perk like most of the perks that come out in the past year. Now, where does the truth lie from my point of view? Is this perk something that's actually like ruining games as an OP and deserves a nerf, or is it something that is just kind of like an interesting meta shakeup that I think that is good for the game's health, especially on the survivor side of things? I'm going to go out on a limb here, and don't let me finish my thoughts. I know the thing you're going to probably be typing out in the middle of what I'm saying. Let me finish my thought with it, okay? I will say, since Gabriel Soma's come out and people have been using made for this, I've seen made for this in almost every single game of Dead by Daylight I have played since I have started playing since the chapter release. Sometimes I'll get a match with like nobody using it, but by and large, I have at least two made for this is on a team in most of my Dead by Daylight games. And since like the accusation from the killer side of why it shouldn't be nerfed is because it's so mindless, and it just kind of like plays the game for you, and it specifically wins the game for you. It's that strong. My win rate has not changed. My win rate has not changed in the time that Made for This has come out. Most days of Dead by Daylight, I will win typically 92 to 93% of my matches. I will get a draw or two, so like a 2 out, and then I'll have like 1-3 out. Those are typically how days of Dead by Daylight go for me when I'm playing on Killer. I'll have like 1-3 out, couple draw matches, but the rest will still be victories. The rest will still be 3 or 4 Ks all the way down the line. My win rate is still in the lower 90s, the lower 90 percentile, which is very, very high. I remember we talked about this like a couple months ago when it comes to like, the win rate I typically have. So I went back and I looked at like my average win rate after this Made for This has come out, and I've had Made for This in most of my games on multiple teams, multiple players using it, and my win rate is pretty much the same. Most days faltered between like an 89% to like a 92%. So realistically, it's not, at least in my personal experience, it's not like winning matches for the survivors. It's really not, because my win rate has not changed. If this perk really was like just slap it on and just win the game for free, my win rate would probably drop, considering that I see like at least 2 in most of the matches of Dead by Daylight that I play. Now, the thing that I do see a lot with this is like, if you put it on with hope at the end of the match, it makes somebody like extremely hard to catch. But like, I would refer you back to like my thoughts on adrenaline. It's like hope is another one of those perks that is literally a dead perk slot until you win 90% of the game. As survivor, you have to get 5 gens done, which, especially if you're not in a 4-man, that's very much easier said than done. Very, very much easier said than done. Very much easier said than done. So if you as Killer have gotten to the point in the match where you have lost all 5 gens, you have failed at your primary objective, because even though your name is Killer, your primary objective as Killer is to defend the gens. If you've made it to 5 gens completed, there's probably something you could have done better, whether that play scummier, run a stronger build. There's probably something you could have done there to prevent that from happening. So I don't find perks like Adrenaline and Hope particularly offensive, because like the survivors have won 90% of the game at that point. It's just like a good job. Nice job for winning most of the match. Now here's a little pat on the back. Here's a little extra boost to help you really stick the landing on that end game. You have already lost most of the match, so I don't find those perks very bad. So when people bring it up, it's like, well, Made for This stacks with Hope and that's OP. It's like, you already lost 90% of the match up until that point. And I get what you're saying. Like, I will say this first. I say this later. I was supposed to say it first. Because, like, I get what you're saying. Is like a lot of matches you do end up pulling out after the gens are done. But realistically, that should not be a constant. That should not be something that's consistently or frequently happening, that you're having to, constantly pull your matches out in some, like, end game slug or something like that after all the gens are done. Like, most of your good gameplay should be happening in the first 5 gens. If you're in a situation where you're constantly having to rely on some sort of end game juggle to try and like secure your consistent win rate, there's probably more you need to be doing to secure how good your gameplay is throughout the first 5 gens of the match. That's just my opinion. That's just my take. And I know it's going to upset some people. Probably there's going to be another conversation down there about like casual versus sweat play and all that wonderful stuff. But that could be another video we can talk about. We'll tackle that when we get there. Now, that being said, kind of going on that same thought as well. Is that a lot of players may have issues dealing with this perk. And if I had one change to it that I would make, that I would try to make it more balanced, was potentially make it more in line with something like Off the Record, where you do just kind of get that effect, but it's on a timer, a long timer, because Off the Record has a fairly long timer, but it is on a timer. It is something that is not going to last the entirety of the time you're injured. It's just going to last for like the first minute or two of the time that you are injured, and then it will expire. Just something like that will give it some sort of limiter, something that doesn't make it to where you can just kind of like run somebody forever and it will have some sort of expiration to it. That way it will help people that, you know, particularly struggle with it. But the TLDR of how I feel about it personally is like, I'll notice when somebody has it. Like I said, somebody will take an extra loop or something. I'm like, or they'll be slightly fast. Like, especially since I run like Tomb Carburetor Billy a lot because I think it's fun. I'll be 110 and I'll be chasing somebody. I'll have a little bit of a hard time catching up, and I'm like, I feel like they have made for this. But like, I still down them. I still get them. For the, like, it's not like Made for This is like literally winning them the chase or anything. Like I said, my win rate has not been drastically changed since Made for This has been introduced to the game. So I feel like people are kind of vastly overstating how strong this is. I think it's a very, very solid, very, very strong perk. I feel like it is a top 10 perk in the game, like 100%. I don't know if it's top 5. It might be, but it's definitely top 10. It may not even be top 5. It's a very fantastic perk. It's a very, very strong perk, but I don't think it's like super S tier. I feel like people are over exaggerating the strength of this perk. And it's kind of just like the new boogeyman that people are going to be yelling about. And there's always a DBD boogeyman, right? Like, there is always a perk that people are going to kind of go to, well, both Survivor and Killer, I will say. There's always going to be a boogeyman perk that's the one that's ruining the meta right now. That's the one that's OP. That's the one that's autopilot and winning the game for people. There will always be a boogeyman perk. There will always be something like that. And I feel like Made for This is just kind of like the DBD boogeyman right now. And it's realistically really good, but it's not as crazy as people make it out to be. So that's just my take. That's just what I'm cool with. And that being said, I play a lot of 110 killers. Like, if you're talking about the 110 thing, I play Huntress. Huntress is the character I enjoy playing the most. I was just talking about, I love Tomb Carburetor Billy, which I play a lot. I like Deathslinger. Like, I play a lot of 110 killers. So, like, this should be realistically affecting me the most, but, like, I like Spirit a lot now. I'm learning how to play Spirit. Oh, that's a little different because she has a movement ability. But, you know, like, I play a lot of 110 killers. So this realistically should be affecting me a lot. And I feel like I would notice first over a lot of people that are like, Made for This is so stupid. But I'm not, which I think is a good sign for the game, for the perk's health for the game. So, yeah, what do you guys think of Made for This? I know there's going to be a lot of disagreement on this, so go ahead and let me have it down in the comments below. Just try to be polite about it. But other than that, thank you so much for watching, guys. I do upload daily, though, so hopefully I will see you tomorrow. But if I do not, I will see you when I see you. Goodbye.